Hey, welcome back to another episode of Card Talk, a podcast where we spend just a little bit of time talking about cards from Lord of the Rings card game. I'm your host, Dave Walsh.
And I'm Grant Thompson, just along for the ride.
And I'm Ted Bannock, and I, believe it or not, guys, it's going to be a shocker, but I enjoy to talk about cards every now and again.
Every once in a while.
Every once in a while, we get together and we talk about cards, and I love it. So that's what we're going to do today.
Yeah. It's always good to talk about cards. So
yes. We talk about two things, David. We talk about cards, and we talk about patrons.
We do talk about patrons as well. So, Ted, it's nice to know that you haven't lost your touch. Throwing it over to me with the patrons. It's always good. So, anyways, as Ted said, we love our patrons. They're the lifeblood of the show. They pay for hosting fees and swag and things that go out to the community, drawings and fun stuff that we get to do here. So if you want to become a patron of the show, we have levels from $1 all the way up to, we have a $20 Ready Teddy level that honors Ted Bannock, our favorite host of Card Talk. So,
Well, he's the only host that actually has a patron level. So.
I know.
That's true.
Right. That's what makes them our favorite. So, if you're interested in joining at any level, feel free. The address is right here. It's patreon.com/cardtalk2018. And, it's because of the patrons that, everything is awesome for the community and for what we do here. So I'd like to thank all the patrons by name on each show. So I will go through that list. And today it will be a dramatic reading all in one breath. Ready? Dominic, Joseph, Phil, Lou, Sean, David, Robert, Mike, Daniel, Kyle, Jason, Justin, Russ, Matt, Joshua, Jake, James, Vardine, Carl, Niall, Joe, Peter, Edmund, and Alex. 24
Boom.
Patrons. So
in a row,
all lined up. Thank you so much, everybody. So, but I guess we could sit here and talk about patrons all day long, right?
all day. But we do occasionally talk about
But
cards.
the end has to come at some point.
Right.
The end.
The end of the patron list has to come. So let's move on to the card that we're going to talk about on today's show. This is the last episode of 2020. I don't know if that's awesome or if that's like horrible or if that's awesome, depending on how you feel about 2020. So, but Grant, why don't you take it away? Talk about what's the card. What are we talking about?
Well, I thought you were going to say, what did you think of 2020?
No, let's save that for our analysis because there's not much to talk about in terms of the card. So we might as well.
Well, let's just start off with my thoughts on 2020 because the card we're talking about does not exist. That's my thoughts on this card.
Okay, well, tell everybody what card doesn't exist.
Okay, it's the zero-cost neutral event from the road to Rivendell. Can you guess what it is? I bet you can't because it's the end comes.
Boy, do we got a banger for our listeners today.
Response. After a dwarf character leaves play, shuffle the encounter discard pile back into the encounter deck. Who on earth designed this card?
Well, I have some ideas who had designed it. Probably Nate French, but I know what you mean, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's so...
The only good thing about this is its flavor text.
Oh, yeah.
He is dead then, said Frodo. I feared it was so.
The art's pretty good, too.
I would say, the most
okay.
redeeming quality of this card is the art, right? It's got some dwarves in front of Balin's tomb, it looks like.
Yep.
So it's got that going for it, but I'm excited because usually we like to talk about. I'm excited to dig into this one.
You're excited. So Ted, let's put everybody out there on the same level as us. We try to every at the end of the year we do a Christmas episode. We something last year we did Last year we did Treebeard with a little Christmas hat on him. That was pretty funny, right?
Yeah.
And so, Ted, this was your idea. Actually, all our holiday themed shows seem to come from you. So, Ted, can you explain to us the choice in The End Comes?
Yeah. So it's just 2020 has been, I'm just going to say, generally not a great year for anyone. And I couldn't think of a card that represented the entire year more than this card, both in just like what it does in the game and what people think of it in the community. And then the name too just also kind of fit in, right? Like the end is coming of 2020. Like this is the moment we've all looked forward to. So if this card has any redeeming quality, like it's its name.
Right. That's what I was going to say. Like the best part about this card is its name. So, yeah. So, Ted, where do you use this card? I feel like there's only like one or two spots to ever use this card, right?
Yeah. So, I'm anxious to hear your guys' thoughts as well. But usually, everyone knows kind of where I stand. We're like each card in the card pool has its place, and this card does too. So I will name them, at least from my perspective. But of all the cards,
wait, you said you're going to name them or name it? Like you're implying that it has more than one use in any.
I found two.
Two. Oh, okay.
I found two uses. For
two more
card.
than I have, but go ahead.
and even then, these scenarios, it's like it's almost more effort than it's worth.
Right.
Right. Which is just like 2020 in a nutshell.
Right. Exactly.
So first of all, it has this. So let's talk about what it does, right? So shuffling the encounter discard pile into the encounter deck. The two use cases I can think to even think about playing this card are the handful of scenarios that come out of the Angmar Awaken cycle, which feature the Cursed Dead enemy.
Right. Where when you put the one in play, you have to go into the discard pile and find the rest of those copies.
Yes. So if you have, and there's 5 copies in standard, and I think there's 7 in the nightmare scenarios.
Right.
So it's quite possible that on nightmare it actually could be merited. Where if you have 6 Cursed Dead in your discard pile, or even 4, right on standard.
Right.
When that next one, that 5th one comes out, you now get 5 enemies from that one card if you don't cancel the reveal effect.
Right.
That's a lot. Like that's a lot of things.
Right. And they have low engagement cost. And I mean they're not horrible enemies to deal with, but if you get enough of them, you just get overrun, and that's right.
Yeah.
So sure.
So you could use this card to, when you get to that point, like 3 or 4 of these Cursed Deads, get this card to trigger, shuffle them back in, so you don't have to deal with that.
Right.
I think that's kind of the obvious one. I'd say is the most used.
The most used.
Like right, like that's the most comes to players' minds. Like, you can avoid the Cursed Dead. The second thing that you could use this for, I haven't done it, is in the following cycle, the Dream Chaser cycle, you have to make sailing tests for a couple of the quests. Like half the quests in that cycle. You could run this in there as a card, because if you get through some of the initial icons too quickly, you could use this to recur and refill the deck, so you have more sailing icons available in the deck.
Right. Yeah, if there's some sort of
there's only one problem with that. You have to lose a dwarf character.
Well, yeah. So, So let's talk about that. So talk about that, Grant. Like you have to lose the dwarf character, so that really.
Yeah.
Which, how are you going to do that during the quest phase, right? So.
Well, unless you're taking a lot of direct damage or discarding, have a treachery that says discard a character, or Born Aloft to make that character leave play, there isn't really much options outside of combat for killing one of your allies.
Spirit Bofer!
Hey, yeah, David, you're right. So this just is when a dwarf character leaves play.
Right.
So the actually, yeah, that's the best way to get this card a trigger. Spirit Gopher, by his ability, you pay a resource, put him into play, and then he goes back to your hand after you quest.
Right.
If you
So
quest successfully.
if you quest successfully, yeah,
Right.
which the way, if you're playing this card, you're probably not gonna.
If you're playing this card, you're probably not going to quest successly, and
Yeah.
then you're going to have Bofer in play, and then
Right.
you're not going to be able to trigger the end comes, and you just
Right.
briefed yourself into.
I've just had a look at some of the deck lists that contain this card.
I did the same
And
thing. I was like, who puts this card in their deck? Let's look at Rings DB and see what's published.
There's one deck there. It's the one grief deck to rule them all. Runs Messenger of the King Galadriel. Step 1, set up Messenger of the King. Step 2, fetch Galadriel. Step 3, set up the One Ring. Step 4, lose.
Right.
It has 2,077 cards in there.
That's all the cards. Has every card in the card pool.
Yeah. So most of the decks online that have this card are not a serious deck.
Yeah.
Right.
That's.
I mean,
it's pretty terrible. But so David, what do you?
Well, that's
what
what
do
I
you
was going to say.
think?
So like we could joke about 2020 all the time, right? The end comes like. The thing is that I want this to be a more happy card because the end is coming on 2020, but I will say that the one time that I think that it could be used, and I haven't used it, for this, but I think the one time that it could find reasonable usage is anytime you have to dig out something from the encounter deck, and it pops off as like a shadow card, and then you instead of going through the whole encounter deck and then waiting to reshuffle it, if you so in Framsburg, there's you need to get those three things.
Oh, the loot objectives.
The loot objectives, and then and there's only 2 ways to dig it out of the encounter deck. So that third one becomes a pain in the neck because you may have to go through the deck 3 or 4 times because it could come off as a shadow card because there's enough enemies. So, if you see it come off as a shadow card, you can immediately play not immediately, you have to wait for a dwarf character.
You can't even play it immediately.
I know.
Even if this card said
just
0 cost,
get rid of the requirement,
the discard pile. It would still be just kind of okay.
Fun. Right. The fact that it's quality, there's a quality.
It has to,
qualified.
That's what baffles me. It has to be a character leaving, even if it's not a character leaves play. No, it has to be a dwarf character. You might as well just make it a hero and put Brock Ironfist into play in one swift blow when you're triggering this card, as far as I'm concerned.
One swift blow. You might do it all. Do it all up.
Take this encounter deck. I lose my Fallen
Dine Ironfoot.
Yeah, I lose.
You might as well just screw it up just like all 2020 has been, right?
Joke's on you, encounter deck. I get to shuffle you together, and I get to put Brock Ironfist into play.
I get to put all your tricks right back into you. Oh, but that's really what this is. In the very beginning of the game, there was a couple times where the Gollum clues, maybe you want, or Gollum himself you'd have to go find, or so and at the very beginning, this came out. I'm gonna have a moment of being fair to Nate. This came out in Road to Rivendell, and that second cycle was super dwarf heavy, right? And so the designers of the game don't know where the game is going, and so you gotta some cards get designed for the current meta. The meta for the game, and I get it. Nate designed the game, so he didn't have to necessarily design dwarves to be the meta, but he understood that dwarves were going to be the meta. So here's a card that does this weird thing for the current meta at that time of the game.
But at that point in the time of the game, yes, dwarves were becoming the meta. But why make such a bad response?
I don't know why. Why 2020? like,
Right.
like
I mean,
there it is.
I have all respect for you and what you've done, but this card, please just answer me why.
I know.
Yeah, I am curious to know. And I've heard Nate French say in interviews like he likes cards that aren't good. He likes like these nichey cards. That just I don't know, like part of how he designs cards or likes to play his games. And I think here we see one of those examples. But I would be curious to specifically know. So David, you did name a couple of early quests where I think it's very relevant. But I want to know, like Grant, I want to know like what was he thinking of specifically? Can we confirm this? Like, what was coming up? Like, what was going on in their mind at the time?
Yeah. I'd love to get Nate French on the show just to discuss this one card and why it was made like this.
Well, I think that there's a couple of cards that I would like to talk to Nate about in terms of their badness. You know, like
yeah, but I think this one.
Do you think that like the designer like designs the bad card and was like, let's like almost as like a let's let the community wrap their brain around it to try to figure out if this card is actually any good, you know? like is this card good? Wait, why is this card in here if it doesn't do anything? If it actually hurts you, like what is the point of that? You know, like think of Road to Rivendell. What famous card is in Road to Rivendell that nobody ever wants to see? Sleeping Sentry. Like, so what is he going to do? He's going to put hey, I have an idea. Let's put the card that puts Sleeping Sentry back into the deck in this adventure pack. Like, what is going on? Like, I just don't get it. Like, this is exactly like, here we go. 2020 in a nutshell. If I could pick the one card that describes 2020, and Ted, you were ahead of the curve on this, it's the frickin' end comes. Like, the end. I don't even know where to put the frickin' in there. Is it the frickin' end comes? The end frickin' comes? Frickin' the end frickin' comes? Like, how many, like, what do we say?
Dealer's choice.
Dealer's choice. Yeah, so.
Right, but here's the question. If. I can't even look at this card with a straight face. It is that bad.
All right, so hold on. I'm reading the comments section from Card Game DB.
Okay.
Someone asked, is there a reason they want this to happen? And someone actually points out a treachery card that I forgot about. They said, in the Road of cycle, there is a treachery card which puts all orcs in the discard pile into the staging area.
Ambush.
It's Orc Ambush.
Right. And that's from the same cycle as this, the Road to Rivendell. And if you don't have any orc enemies in the staging area, all orc enemies in the discard pile get added to the staging area.
Yeah. So this,
there it is.
I guess, was like a counter to that card because it's in the same cycle.
Provided that you're running a dwarf hero, a dwarf character that you want to lose.
Yeah, and that's the thing is even right the conditions on it. Like a dwarf character leaving play, this card would be if it just said like for 0 cost shuffle. It would be like, okay, I would see use cases. I would play this in all the scenarios we just mentioned.
Well,
but for like,
it's like a very bad Shadow of the Past.
Yeah.
Right. The Shadow of the Past at least just puts the top card. So like that's better tech for like the scenarios that I'm saying. Like you just see like and I'm like the solo player of the team here. You know, like so if I see Gollum go by and like I just Shadow of the Past and put him back on the top of the encounter deck and know that that's where he is and figure it out, you know. I don't shuffle the whole blooming thing back in there. You know, like what is going on? What's the scenario that has Orc Ambush?
So Road to Rivendell.
It is Road to Rivendell. So is this?
Yep, it's got Sleeping Sentry and Orc Ambush in that.
Okay.
Scenario.
So those are nasty treachery cards.
They are nasty.
Yes.
But so is the penalty?
You got to add them back so you'll see them again.
Right. So the penalty for putting all the orcs back into the encounter deck by shuffling, so Orc Ambush whiffs, is that you're also putting Sleeping Sentry back into the encounter deck, and so.
Yeah, unless you
And
like statistically don't see those cards in the first half of the encounter deck, and then you reshuffle it midway through
But then
just to try to not see them again. It's mind-boggling.
But then you can't do it in response to actually drawing the cards. Like, you have to plan to do this with dwarves probably in the combat phase previous to the
Right.
previous to the
Yeah.
staging step that you're doing.
Like, to put these conditions on it is just it's just crazy.
I mean,
It's
I
like,
think
it didn't need this.
No, I think if they just scratched out the dwarf part and just had after a character leaves play,
I still think it's still bad.
It would still be bad, but it would be slightly better.
The funny thing is, if it just said response shuffle, like after you play this card, shuffle the encounter discard pile back.
Yeah, it was just an
encounter,
action.
Like, yeah, even if it was a response, even if you could play this any time you wanted to, like, right. It was response. If you're breathing, shuffle the encounter discard. Right, exhale to shuffle this card back.
Yeah.
Like, isn't that what we want to do with 2020? Okay. Like,
so the question is,
exhale to shuffle 2020 back into the pile of years to never have to see it again.
Yeah, COVID, the giant treachery card that we all want to reshuffle back into the encounter.
I don't think I would want to reshuffle it back into the encounter deck because that means it's going to come up again.
I guess not, right? Well, I was thinking that there's way more cards and there's way more years than there are encounter cards in a deck. You know, like, I guess if I had a choice of going back to 1492 and 2020, I don't know, maybe as long as I could have my Lord of the Rings cards, I would pick 1492. You know, like, that's the thing, you know, like, and I guess that goes to the sailing test thing, right? So I'll bring it back to something serious, right? If for some reason you have a big, thick encounter deck and you if you just happen to arbitrarily draw a whole bunch of sailing test cards off the top of the encounter deck, you know, and then you want to shuffle them back in, that's fine. But you know, I don't know. I don't
it's so much effort for such a small reward, and even the reward you get is just, it might not even have any impact. Like I said, if it was an action that just said action reshuffle, I could see myself putting it into some of the decks.
You could
in some of the scenarios.
Really?
Yeah, I could. Yeah, like teching against some of, like, if I was playing, I think the nightmare scenarios against the Cursed Dead, and it was an action.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So it becomes a little less nichey when you take away the requirement there.
Conditions. Yeah. But even then, it's
this bit would make it better. Action. Mine the top 3 cards of your deck. Shuffle the encounter deck back into the encounter discard pile back into the encounter deck. It would work for a dwarf mining deck.
Yeah, that would be cool too, to see if it interacted right. If it did something with the mining mechanic, or maybe if this card, like, when it was mined, it did something with shuffling. Like, I have no idea. My question is, okay, I wonder, to play this card as it stands, how many resources would it have to give you as a player for you to put it in a deck? Right? So what if this card said response
after a dwarf character
gain 5 resources? Like, what is the threshold where you would consider how many resources does it have to give for free?
Right. If there was a rule in the that you could get 2 resources, but the penalty was you had to reshuffle the encounter deck, I think, you know, like, I think that 2 could make it, but I think it's so quest specific, you know, like,
I think if it was resource specific like that, I think making it a bit like Legacy of Numenor, where you play this, you shuffle the encounter discard pile back into the encounter deck, and you gain 1 resource on each hero in play, would make it worthwhile.
But then you would just do that. I mean, this would be a first card bomb. First, like,
exactly.
You get 3 of them in your opening hand, and all of a sudden you're like. So I think,
then you limit it to 1 per turn.
What if it said something like, response after a dwarf character leaves play, shuffle all decks in play? Then you have to shuffle. So you get your deck back, but then you get the encounter deck, but then you also have to shuffle the quest.
So
quest
even that would
deck.
be good,
like,
because
because it's like a test.
I didn't know that at the time, because I don't think the mining thing. Well, when did the card? What's the one that gives you resource? Hidden Cache. When did Hidden Cache come out? That wasn't in Werewolf, right? That was like a later mechanic that they added. I feel like. Right?
I can't remember when Hidden Cache came out.
It came out in Morgul Vale, so it actually was the following cycle.
Right.
So yeah, but if this interacted with, if it did, a deck recursion, then that fits into the mining theme, right? Because you want to recur the cards you can. But it doesn't do that. It doesn't do any of the things that we want it to do. It just does this terrible nichey thing, and we want to see it. We want the card's name to come on itself. We want the end of the card to come. I don't know.
Right. We want the end to come to the end comes.
Right.
I don't know. Like,
I would say it's as bad as Brock and Bjorn's Hospitality.
Well, let's be real. Like, you can include Bjorn's Hospitality and Brock Iron Fist in a deck and use Flame of Arnor. This you whiff with Flame of Arnor. Like that's horrible. Like, you can't even use it to boost it.
You can still get the ready off Flame of Arnor with this card.
You get the ready.
So it's not a total whiff.
But then you have to exhaust to attack. Like, I don't know. Like,
it's bad.
This is bad.
So I will.
This is a very, very bad.
Yep.
Card.
And I am. You guys know me. I am gentle on cards.
I know. I know you are. You are gentle. You're one of the most reasonable guys to talk about in terms of cards. Actually, that's how you found your niche in, I guess, the community, right? Cardboard of the Rings, episode 71, right? There's a place in the card pool for every card.
Every card, and it's really. This is the one that tests that, like that defense, like that theory. Like, there is, but like, it's not even like worth the trouble to do. So,
well, that's what I was gonna say. Like, you know how you were saying, like the Orc Ambush, right? Like, the problem with Orc Ambush, not the problem, but the thing is that there's other cards to deal with Orc Ambush. Just cancel it. Just test to will it, right?
Test to will, Dwarven Tomb to recur, test to will, right. Eleanor.
Yeah, like whatever. It doesn't. I mean, there's 100 other ways to do that. You know, there's not a ton of ways necessarily to deal with, like you said, the dead, the cursed dead. If you miss it in an objective that passes you by, like, there's not a bunch of ways to deal with that. So that, I mean, that's right. So, like, but whatever. Like, it, like Framsburg. I bring up Framsburg because famously on our YouTube channel, there's a 37 round over 2 hour episode or show that's the Ghost of Framsburg, right? But the thing is that, like, you get to the point where you're playing those, and if you pass up the objective, like, I won that game. I won that game in round 8. You know what I mean? Like, I won. I just had to wait till I drew all the cards and got through it and did the thing and did it, you know, like, until I got the objective. And so that's like, so even then it's not like required to do that. You know, the Cursed Dead is really the only thing that makes a lot of sense. I guess in the Gollum objective is the other thing in the Dead Marshes, right? Like, don't you have to find Gollum in the Dead Marshes and then tame their stuff? So, like,
start out and play, and then if you get 8 resources, it shuffles back into the encounter deck.
Right. And so if you lose Gollum, like, that scenario is really challenging solo. So, you know, I mean, but I'm still not using this card in that.
No,
like,
that's the thing, is even all the cases I've named and that you guys have named, I just don't play this card.
Just don't play this card at all. Leave it in the binder, or even better, take it out the binder, get a lighter, and burn it to the Mount Doom.
Do the same thing with 2020, Grant. You just described the same thing. Right. Like, let's put 2020 in the binder and never look at it again.
That's exactly That's exactly how we
You're
feel.
you're gonna look over it as you turn the page to other years, other cards.
I'm actually going to get a permanent marker and just put 2020 on my copy of the end comes.
Oh,
Any listener out there wants to do an alt art 2020 version of the end comes? We'd love to have it as a submission.
to see that.
Yeah, it's just got a picture of Donald Trump on.
So
I will gladly put this one through the ringer.
You guys want to ring? You guys want to ring 2020?
Rip, ready to go.
I was going to say that, like, it's not uncommon for players of card games to use proxies. So, as is our card gaming, I don't know, thing as we can do in card games, we're going to use this card as a proxy for 2020. So, what we want to say is we have a highly scientific yet arbitrary system for rating 2020 or cards in the game. And there's a scale that starts at 1 ring, which is the 1 year or card to rule them all, and 10 rings, which is the worst year in the world or the worst card in the game. And so we take, and if it's the worst card in the game, we throw it back into the fiery chasm from whence it was made. So I will go first, and Ted, I'm going to let you go last.
Okay. I will just say. So I was going to ask. I say, David, would you like to go first? You've been our you're our lead host, and I think Card Talk has had a wonderful year, and it's been a great year for me to another year has gone by, join the show, and so please take the honors in rating this on the ringer scale.
The year, the worst year ever. The card, the worst card. Like, it's just, like, it's not even great in its horribleness. That's Brock Iron Fist. Like, the card that is great in its horribleness is Brock. Like, there have been some horrible cards in this game, but this card, like, it does, like you said, the end comes, and I was like, what's the end comes? And then I was like, oh, right, the end comes. Like, that's who's even...
First question,
right?
What does it do?
Yeah, right, what is that? And then, like, I kind of remembered it based on its art. We talked about its art, but, like, so much like 2020, I am going to throw this card back into the fiery chasm from whence it was made. So this card gets a 10. Grant, what's your opinion?
Well, as far as the year goes, this hasn't exactly been the worst year. It's been a bad year, but for me personally, it hasn't been the worst year. I've gotten a lot of Lord of the Rings in. I've made some brilliant friends over the past year through Lord of the Rings and through doing things through the community. So on that scale, it hasn't exactly been a bad year for me. But as far as this card goes, it's a 10. It is bad. I want to put this into the fires of Mount Doom personally.
I know. And so, much like the word 10 is the name Ted. So, Ted, what do you think of this card?
10.
That's it?
Yeah, I'm gonna. What are you going to put some fanfare on it? No, dude, this is like the worst card in the card pool. There's some everything. Like I said, a lot of cards that get overlooked. They have a use in certain deck archetypes, against certain scenarios, and this one is just so far removed from all of that. And if this card was completely removed from the card pool and wasn't replaced, not a single person would complain. You could just remove this card, or remember, be like, okay, it's gone now. What did it do before? Who cares?
Right.
And that's just the mark of that's really not a useful card.
Yeah,
it's a 10.
Okay.
But I'd like to head on to what Grant said, because he made a really great point about the year. Like, yeah, the year's been terrible, as everyone had to adapt and deal with everything faced in 2020. But I think there's sort of a silver lining in the Lord of the Rings, and really just gaming community in general, or when people weren't able to get together to play board games in person, I think it brought the online aspect up to another level, specifically talking about the League of Cooperative Gaming and the online conventions that got created by a great a group of people, and everyone makes effort to contribute events and be online during those weekends. And we at least got that out of everything that's gone on. And I think that's something that's going to carry over and continue, is this increased online activity, even when things do go back to normal.
Yeah, I agree. And I may have overstated that 2020 was horrible. It has been really tough for people who know I'm a teacher, and so that makes it, makes my professional life a challenge, and just things like that. But there are, like Ted said, there are silver linings, and the gaming community is one of those silver linings for sure. So, well, there it is, our last card of 2020, and just like the year, we want this card to have the end. I don't even know what I'm trying to say anymore. I'm trying to be all fancy, but it's not going to work. I can't even make this card fancy, right? Like, that's how horrible it is.
That's how terrible it is.
That's how horrible it is.
It's just every way you try to spin it, it's not good, much like this year.
Yep.
But if you have any other words for 2020, now's the time to say it.
Nah. 2020 is 2020. So here comes 2021, and here comes the end of the show. And join us again as we talk about more cards from the game in 2021. Have a great day, everybody.
Do you love the content? Here's what you can do to stay connected. Become a patron. The money collected through Patreon goes into keeping the lights on here at the podcast. We love our patrons, and you can join at many different levels. Visit patreon.com/cardtalk2018. You can subscribe to us, whether you're watching our YouTube channel or you're listening to us in your favorite podcatcher. Hit the subscribe button to get notifications of all our new episodes. Didn't know we were an audio podcast? Find us by searching Card Talk to get access to our 120 plus regular episodes. Didn't know we were a video channel? Find us by searching Card Talk LOTR LCG on YouTube, and there you can find not only our regular episodes, but you can find our bonus playthroughs and other content related to the game. Want to get a hold of Ted, Grant, or myself? Feel free to email the podcast at cardtalk2018@gmail.com.